The Tram Network in Sofia, Bulgaria. Known for its extensive variety when it comes to the tram fleet, being one of the largest in Europe and somewhat in the world. Welcome to episode 3 of the Trams in Europe series. In this video we are in the Bulgarian capital of Sofia and we'll be taking a comprehensive overview of the history, the current state and the future of the Sofia Tram Network. Without further ado, let's get into it. But first, let's appreciate this Inekon. Okay, there we go. So, trams in Sofia, Bulgaria. Where to begin? History. It's always a good starting point. So, actually, first of all, the Sofia Tram Network is approximately unknown length. Well, what do I mean by this? In 2006, the Sofia Tram Network was 154 kilometers in length. Unfortunately, the sources seem to quote a year that is, well, 14 years ago. This source here claims it's 73 kilometers long, but that many parts of the tram network have not been destroyed for it to have been shortened by such a large extent. So, I'm not too sure exactly what length it is. Unfortunately, I cannot ascertain that information. But yes, generally we know it's at least 73 kilometers and it's less than 154. So, quite a big margin of error. Anyway, let's get into the history of the Sofia Tram Network. The Sofia Tram Network began construction in 1898 and it took 3 years before it opened. So on the 1st of January 1901, the Sofia Tram Network was born, featuring 6 tram lines, most of them centered around the central area, but one running all the way to Kniazevo, which was kind of the ostentatious or the posh area of Sofia, but at that time it wasn't really part of the city. It was much, it was separate, as you can see here. This tram line lives on today in the line name 6, line name 5, ironically, because the 6 now goes very far to the north side of the city, whereas the 5 now goes to the very south side of the city. Well, it's not the very north part of the city in terms of tram networks. There are trams that go further north, but anyway, irony where irony is due. Nonetheless, this line 5 is still one of the flagship routes. So basically, when the line opened, there was 25 mono trains with 10 trailers, i.e. wagons, and 6 tram routes, and the total length was 23 kilometers in single track. So the tram network has grown quite a bit since then. I think the line originally was horse-drawn, and it later was electrified. How interesting. Until 1938, trams were being imported from elsewhere. So originally, this tram network was built by, was built by some French construction company, and then they also had some Belgian connections. However, post 1938, this changed. They stopped importing trams, and the Bulgarian-made Tramkar was born. Tramkar was essentially a company that made trams in Bulgaria for Bulgaria. Note that there was only one city that ever had trams in Bulgaria, and that is the capital, Sofia, in the west of Bulgaria. So, how did this start off? In 1959, a 4-axle Komsomolets truck. Bear in mind that Google Translate is not ideal here, but yeah, we will use that there because it's just easier guide. In 1961, we had the articulated 6-axle cosmonaut, which is actually named after astronaut. These names of the trams do have some sort of intrinsic value. Lots of times they're related to do with national events, and I guess they're meant to evoke some sort of national association or national pride. In 1965, the Tram Sofia, named after, yes, you guessed it, the capital of Bulgaria, Sofia, where the tram network existed. This was a single joint tram, and in the 1970, 5 years later, the Sofia 70 was built, and this was just a jointed tram. In 1979, we had the Sofia 100, which was single jointed. In 1981, to mark the 1,300th year since the establishment of the Bulgarian state, we had the Bulgaria 1300, double articulated 8-axle tram. Okay. Then in the following years to come, in 1986, we had the T6M-700. These trams survive to this day, although their days unfortunately are limited. So hence we have a modern picture of the T6M-700. And then in 1987, we had the T6MD-1000, although these are gone unfortunately. Oddly enough, because they're built later. And then finally, we also had the T8M-900, which is this tram here. Basically, the only difference being that it has this middle section here, slightly different bodywork. You'll notice the lights are slightly different. Actually, they're not, but it is visually slightly different. It has this bumper thingy. Then also, just to continue on the trend of Tramkar before I start going back into the other side of the history, but basically we also had the T8K503. There was very limited information about this, i.e. absolutely zilch, therefore I cannot give you much information about that. And then finally, I guess the final kind of existence of Tramkar is in the form of the T8M-700IT Inekon. So basically, these are Czech-made trams in Ostrava in the Czech Republic, and these were built off the T6M-700 model. So they had this middle section here, which made it wheelchair accessible and low floor. But yeah, apart from that, that was kind of the end of the Tramkar. The Tramkar kind of ended earlier than that in 1999. No, Tramkar kind of ended after that. Tramkar still exists. They still renovate depots. Not depots, they still renovate trams. So that was just kind of a brief history of Tramkar, and we'll talk a bit more about the trams when we talk about the future of the tram fleet, I guess. But also worth mentioning is that the first depot was at Ulica Kozloduy, just close enough to the central station. This depot was closed in 1999, but this is where it all began. The depot still exists in the sense that they use it to maintain trams, and they also have the heritage trams there, which obviously makes sense because it is a heritage depot. Also, I guess our first fun fact. So the Sofia Tram Network was originally narrow gauge. So when it was built originally, it was narrow gauge and has been narrow gauge for a large part. However, when they started building the new lines in the 1980s, they switched from narrow gauge to standard gauge. Hence, you'll see here the purple section is standard gauge. So the Sofia is one of the few cities, I guess, where they have a mixture of both narrow gauge and standard gauge trams. So basically, the tram networks in the east of the city, which were previously underserved by trams, and they also didn't have the metros because the metro didn't get built until the 2000s. They finally got some trams, and they also got some standard gauge ones. So in 1987, a new tram depot Iskra was built. This is the tram depot here. This is the newest tram depot. So there are three tram depots in Sofia. There is Depot Banishore, which is narrow gauge, that is located again close to the central station. It's located just here. And there is also Depot Krasna Polyana. We'll talk about that fleet later on. So, the tram depot Iskra was opened because they were establishing two new lines. Line 20, which opened in 1987. They bought 37 Tatra T6B5s for this, and these Tatra T6B5s last until this day, and they are still in service on line 20. So line 20 realistically has not changed, apart from the fact that it has been renovated. In 2017, the tracks were renovated along it, and well, if you ever go on those Tatra T6B5s, you'll notice inside sometimes a stench of paint because they paint them with what would seem as normal industrial paint. So yeah, they can make obvious paint. Anyway. In 1995, the second new tram line was opened, the line 22, running from Depot Krasna Polyana. So what they did also then is that, if you look here, there are parts of the tram network that are both standard gauge and narrow gauge. So specifically, this is the multi-cradle part. Along this part of the line, you'll see three tracks. You'll see, because you have for the narrow gauge and the standard gauge. So they have the 22 running along two new areas along here, Ulica Ordin, Ulica Petr Dimkov, and then also running down to Depot Krasna Polyana, and then to Autostancia Istok, which is the east bus station. A fun fact about the line 22 terminus was that when this terminus was built, it's actually the only turning circle and terminus that's underground. Well, the terminus, I mean, where the trams lay over. The idea originally was, when they were building this east bus station, was that there would be an underground section where people could connect with the tram network, with the tram line. However, this never came into fruition, so whilst the infrastructure is there, having envisaged this vision, it's not actually used, so now the trams just turn around there, but don't actually let off passengers there, and it is not allowed for passengers to go in there. So, yeah. And then finally, in the 2000s, the line 23 was established. Line 23 originally ran from Bladeskichat, which just means Uchicha, down to Ulica Obikolna. However, this had to be shortened because it's using the very old but legendary Duewag GT8 Pendels, which are over 70 years old, built in 1969, I think. So at the moment, it runs from Rzeka, making it the only line that doesn't go into the city center, apart from line 11. And ironically, this was the newest line for quite a while and had the oldest tram fleet. On the topic of line 22, whilst line 22 opened in 1995, unlike line 20, it did not get new rolling stock. Instead, they bought 29 second-hand Duewag GT8 Pendels for, not GT8 Pendels, Duewag GT6s with B4 wagons, I think they're called, from Germany. I think they were ex-Bonn. These were in service until 2017 when they were replaced by the much less interesting and the much more bland Tatra T6A5s. But more about that later on. Also, since Tramkar stopped producing trams, Sofia once again had to go to importing trams, and they did import quite a few second-hand trams. They bought over 40 Tatra T6A5s, actually, not T6A5s, about 40 Czech Tatra T6A2s. Oh, they weren't bought second-hand though. I think these were bought brand new. These are still in operation, and they are in both Depot Krasnopolana and Depot Banishora. They are the only tram that are tram types that are shared across both depots. This, then we get to the history, I guess the more modern history of the tram network, but it's still quite significant. So, if we take a look here, this is a map of the tram network in the early 2000s, and what this is indicating is that the current tram network is a shell of its former self. As you can see here, this area where the line 2 goes is completely gone, and in fact can't even be found on tram maps from 2010. This map here is from 2010, and as you can see, you can't even find this one there. The reason for this is that the Sofia Metro began construction in the 2000s. Currently, we are they're building the third metro line, and there's technically 4 metro lines, there's 3 corridors. But basically, once they started building the metro, a lot of it did kind of duplicate with some parts of the tram lines, and instead of keeping them like some people would have suggested, instead the Sofia municipality decided that they would remove the trams. So basically, this section here was removed. But including from that, they also removed the 18 from the Russian embassy, or the Rusko Posolstvo in Bulgaria, so this part was gone. They also removed the 7th to Zhukka Nadezhda, which basically just means the complex Hope, residential complex Hope. In addition to that, they also rerouted the 6. I think the 6 might be a new rerouting. They might have built new tram tracks because these are the only tram tracks that are beside the boulevard. Otherwise, they're always in the center. Basically, this section between Han Combat and Ulica Cristo Silianov, I think that's Cristo anyway, was removed, and instead the tram was rerouted this way, again not to duplicate the metro line. So quite a bit of the tram network got an axing. And then in addition, in 2018, the 6 to Loznitz was meant to be a temporary cut. But believe it or not, politicians lie, and they lied about this, including no other than the mayor of Sofia at the time, who lied about the fact that this closure was temporary, but it was permanent. So this part here was also removed and replaced by a trolleybus, because apparently that is adequate. So that was the end of the 6 to Loznitz. As is the case in some Eastern European cities, tram infrastructure is being removed, unfortunately, and it seems to somewhat be on a car-centric level to make more spaces for cars. The Bulgarian state TV, well, not necessarily Bulgarian state TV, but one of the Bulgarian media channels, which has like a show about like comedy, has made a joke before that Bulgarians will starve before giving up their cars. Again, that's just a joke, but little aside. But yes, car ownership is kind of a big thing in Bulgaria. But anyway, that is the tram network. So unfortunately, the tram network has been sinking. Although, I guess in contrast to 2010, we have the line 23. But does that suffice for this stuff that's been removed? Perhaps not. Also to mention is that there are some places that still exist but are no longer used. Namely is the Gara Sofia Sever, which just means Sofia train station north. That's it here. This is the turning circle, so the line 19 was discontinued. It was pretty pointless because, well, this is less than a 2-minute walk from this station here, Modna Kushta Agressia, which just means fashion house aggression. A bit of an odd name, I know. So essentially, this is just there. It's there because in the future, we'll talk about the future plans they have. Basically, in the future, there are plans that potentially the Helsinki corridor will be replaced by metro, and then the trams will terminate here. But also, there's no point of removing this because, well, no cars can go here. So they're safe because there's no use to have this to the cars. Also, as we talked, the parts of the Sofia Tram network have been removed. However, even though some parts have not been used for over 16 years, like this here, this was closed, I think, in 2002. 20 years later, the infrastructure is still there. They never moved the tracks and the poles because, well, as you can see here, this is not a busy street. There's no point. But 20 years on, this still is there. You can see the rust. You can see the things going over. And then you can see here the cars are blocking it because it no longer is being used. And that's just this area here, Zhuka Nadezhda. Likewise, this is part of the line 18. Line 18 was also interesting. Another fun fact, it was the only line that didn't have a... Line 18 still exists, but it's been shortened. But the former line 18 was the only line that have a turning circle. Instead, there was a T-junction where the tram had to reverse to get back around. The line 18 to the Russian embassy wasn't very busy, and hence it was removed. It was also... Net was named as the reason, but I think it was more predominantly the fact it had low patronage. As you can see here, some of the tram infrastructure still exists, but most of it's been removed. Why this is still there, no one knows. Because if you take a look here, then they removed the tram tracks, although the poles are still there. They've removed the overhead wires. Again, why it's done this way, who knows? They haven't added a new lane, but that's that. Also, I have to use Google Maps here, because I just didn't have pictures or time to get pictures. And then this is the last part. This was meant to be maintained, but unfortunately they lied and they removed it anyway. So this is the Endicott tunnel. As you can see now, it's made for the cars. So this is hence the arrow indicating the car is going to go there. And that saw an end to another bit of the tram infrastructure in Sofia. So if we compare the two maps, you can see that there has been a somewhat significant reduction in the size. So this area here has been gone. I don't know why this area is faded, because they actually removed the tram tracks from here, even despite the protests from organizations such as Save Sofia. And then it's basically, this is all gone. The tram track still exists here, but most of this is gone. And then the 6th was rerouted to Ivan Vazov. And then also, as you can see here, this is still there, but it's just faded out because it's not in use. And then this has been rerouted. And then this is a new line. But yeah, that's basically what's happened. So it has been shortened. But as you can see, this is of 2010. So there's no way that over 70 kilometers of the tram network have gone. I think altogether it was about 20 kilometers that were removed. So it would make about 230 kilometers in length the Sofia tram network. Again, might have to do some further reading on that. And this brings us on now to the Sofia tram fleet. As you can see here, the Sofia tram fleet is quite varied. So I'm going to name off the tram fleet and in what depot they're based. As we said, there was 3 depots. There's 2 narrow gauge depots. So as you can see here, we have the T8K503 Pendels. These are tram cars. Now, one thing to note is that all the Bulgarian made trams are in Banishora. When I say this is excluding the Inekon because that's not Bulgarian made, so that's the only tram car not in Banishora. So the T8K503 Pendel, there's 9 of those, and they operate mostly on line 11, although some can appear on line 6, but they're almost exclusively on line 11. Line 11 is essentially just a dumping ground for trams. It runs from the most northern terminus of the tram network to the most southern terminus of the tram network, and it bypasses the city centre, and it has pretty much every single fleet that exists in Depot Banishora. We have 22 T6M-700s, although these are slowly being replaced. The idea is to get rid of most of these and replace them with the much less glamorous Pesa swings. Then there are 8 T8M-700Ms, but I thought these were also known as the T8M-900s, but anyway, those are also Depot Banishora. There are 5 CKD Tatra T4DMs with the B4DM carriages. These are standard gauge trams, so they are based in Depot Iskra, as you would have imagined. And there were more of these trams. There were originally about 13 or 20, but unfortunately, most of them are being replaced by the much less glamorous Tatra T6A5s. Although let's not kid ourselves, this Tatra isn't particularly interesting either. Tatras do have kind of they're kind of notorious for not being particularly interesting. There are 57 CKD T6A2s. Now, these are both in Depot Banishora and in Depot Krasnopoliana. However, in Depot Banishora, they are coupled together, whereas in Depot Krasnopoliana, they are solely uncoupled. There are 38 Pesa swings, 122 NaSFs. So also a fact about this is that originally the first batch was bought in 2014. It was about 20. They were split on line 1 and line 7. And then later, when there was a new tender put out, Skoda had one, although then it turned out there was some slight technicality, something that was not correct in the tender. It was like literally one line. It was very minor, but that led to the whole tender going to Pesa instead, which basically meant instead of us getting Skoda more variety, we ended up with more Pesa swings. And then there are 18 T8M. Oh yeah, and the Pesa swings are in Depot Krasnopoliana. We have 18 T8M-700IT Inekons. These are in Depot Depot Krasnopoliana as well. We have 37 CKD T6B5s. As we said earlier, these were bought brand new and they are in depot Iskar. There are 47 Tatra T6A5s, which replaced the much more interesting Duewags, but they were still quite old. And these are depot cross banana. There are 5 Duewag GT8 Pendels. These only survive because the line 23 is the only line not to have a turning circle at one end of the terminus. So the we call it terminus is with a switchover track, so that requires a pedal tram. And since most of these trams are bought from Central Europe, they generally use turning circles and not switchover points, so most the older second-hand trams generally are not pedals, so unless they buy new ones, which there isn't really money for, especially for a line that is not used often, these legendary trams are living on, which we're happy about. And finally, there are 27 Schindler Waggon AG BE 4/6s. These trams were donated entirely for free from the Swiss government to Bulgaria, with the one string attached was that they were made green, and they were made in green color that was from Basel, which is where their previous home. These trams are known as gherkins or cucumbers because of their color. I will be showing you pictures of these trams, but I just decided we would kind of do it this way first, and also these are in depot Banishara exclusively. In terms of the routes, there are a few routes. I'll name the routes and then what depot they operate out of. So Route 1 operates from the central bus station to railway station Ivan Vazov, but there was talks this will be rerouted, and basically it'll be running from Ivan Vazov to Macedonia Square because of the new line 27 that was launched this year. This line operates out of depot Krasnopolyana, and it is allocated Pesa swings. Line 3 runs from Orlandovci to Zakona Fabrika, which just means sugar factory. This is operated by single, so uncoupled Tatra T6A2s out, and it's operated by depot Krasnopolyana. Line 4 operates from Knyazhevo to Orlandovci, although that's temporary. Beforehand, it was operating from Boulevard Nicola Petkov to Orlandovci, but currently they're doing renovation, or they were doing renovation along parts of line 5, so that's this is as of 2022, and this is operated by Inekon, and it's operated out of depot Krasnopolyana. Line 5 generally runs from Sedemna Palata to Knyazhevo district. Now this was temporarily closed, so again it was running a bus replacement line, and it was actually running from Buxton. There are turning circles along the route that are used whenever they're shown on the routes. This was allocated the Inekons, but this is now going to be getting the new Pesa swings, and it's operated out of depot Krasnopolyana. Line 6 is the longest line in the Sofia Tram Network. It runs from Mobilia 2 to Ivan Vazov, and it's operated by the Bulgarian-made Tramkar. So it's operated from depot Banishara, and it gets essentially any Bulgarian-made tram from the T8K503, but that's not the main one. The allocation is the T6M-700s, followed by the remaining T8M-700Ms, although some of those appear on the 11, and so that's the two main fleet type allocated to line 6. It also gets to the T8K503 occasionally. Bear in mind, sometimes once in a blue moon, they can get something else from the depot. Line 7 runs from Khankobat metro station to Ministersky Vadi, also known as Borovo, and it's operated out of depot Krasnopolyana, and it uses Pesa swings. Line 8 operates from, that's a wrong translation, it actually operates from Julin, so Zhilishin Kvartal Julin 5, which is to the Sedemna Plata courthouse, and it's operated by the Schindler. It was the first route to get the Schindler wagons, and it's operated by depot Banishara. Line 10 runs from West Park to Vitosha Metro Station, and again it's operated by depot Krasnopolyana, and it uses T6A2s, which are uncoupled. Line 11 runs from Ilinci to Knyazhevo. This line pretty much gets anything that depot Banishara has. It has no set allocation, so apart from the TK503s, most of them are line 11. But also it gets T6, it doesn't get T6M-700s, but it gets T8M-700Ms, it gets T6A2s that are coupled, it also gets any leftover Schindler wagons. So yeah, if you want a route with variety, the line 11 is the line to go. Line 12 runs from Pushta Journalist Square to Ilinci. This gets Schindler Waggon AGs, and it's operated out of depot Banishara like line 11. I'm not sure if I said line 11, but it is operated by Banishara. It says it there. I didn't even realize it says it there. This is off memory. But line 18 runs from Journalist Square to Orlandovci, and this is operated out of depot Krasnopolyana. It is currently allocated the Pesa swings, although this might change once the line 5 is back is in full motion. Probably get other stuff. Then we have the 3 standard gauge routes. Until recently, the line 20s represented the standard gauge routes. So we have line 20, which runs from depot Iskar to metro station Opolchensky, and it's operated on depot Iskar. We have line 22, which runs from East Bus Station to it's not railway station, but it's actually depot Krasnopolyana, and it operates out of depot Iskar. And then also we have line 23. I'll talk a bit more about these lines when I show you pictures. Line 23 operates from Druzhba 2 to Geomilif, and it's operated out of depot Iskar. A new line that was launched this year to basically connect Borovo to the Centralny Hali, which is like basically the central area and also the train station. Why they call this the 27, not the 17, like some people suggested, no one knows, because 27, the 20s were, as I said before, standard gauge, but this operates out of Krasnodar and it's currently getting the Pesa swings, although its allocation might change, because the newest route gets the newest trams, although it didn't actually add any new areas. And the Danish overpass is called now this is in Bulgaria. Another fun fact about the fleet, in 2011 they bought loads of these Tatra T4DCs, which were allocated exclusively to line 11. Most of these were in the original color from X-Hala, although were repainted shortly before they were withdrawn. They were withdrawn 8 years later in 2018. They were replaced by Pesa swings, so they had a very short life, but they were very unreliable, so it turned out to be quite a sad ordeal because they didn't last long. They were known as the dinosaurs, and they tried to sell them on, but no one tried to buy them. At one point, I think there's something about Kharkiv in Ukraine buying some, but that didn't go through. So they've been sitting in Depot Krasnodar for well over 4 years, just doing nothing, gathering rust. Some of them have started to be scrapped. Some of them are used on duties that aren't passengers duties, so along the tram line, if they're doing on what they do, that's not passenger duties. So you do see one or two of them drive around, but yeah, most of them stay in the Depot Krasnodar. Depot Krasnodar is also the biggest depot in the system. So here are just some of the tram terminals. Thought it'd be cool to show you guys some of the tram terminals. This is the metro station Vitosha terminus of tram line 10. This is the Gheorghe terminus of tram line 23. This is the Ulica Obikolva or Druzhba 2 terminus of line 23. Now, one thing you also notice is that these tracks extend further out a bit, and then also that's the switchover point. There's no turning circle here. And also, there's just this vast area continues on because there was plans to extend this line 23 further out. Whether we'll see the light of day. This extension will see the light of day. Who knows? This is the Olanovsky terminus of lines 3, 4, and 18. This was renovated recently, and as you can see, it looks a lot different than it was before. This is the Elinsky terminus of line 11 and 12. This terminus is quite rural. It's still technically in the Sofia, but it goes outside of the city area and much into the kind of where we have pharmaceutical companies. You have a few, because they always tend to go in the outskirts. You kind of have then this used to be a market area, now it's just kind of a fields, nothing really there. There's like houses that are kind of much more like rural-esque. So yeah, it's quite the tram network. The Sofia tram network has quite a lot to offer. This is the Lunin 5 terminus of line 8, and as you can see, it's very much at the edge of the city. There are some Soviet era apartment blocks, as is in the case of most of Sofia, to the right, and then to the left you just see the mountains. This is the Knyazheva terminus of line 4. This is probably the poshest area where trams go. This is probably the safest tram line in the sense it will never get destroyed or won't get destroyed for ages, because there will not be a metro to Knyazheva, so the tram will be the light rail will be what will survive there, and also it's probably one where the fastest speed can be achieved, because trams in Sofia, I'll get to that fun fact later, hang on. This is the Borova terminus of the line 7 and the new line 27. This is exclusively Pesa swing ground, so this is where the modern trams are, and these trams have air conditioning, so these are the only trams that have air conditioning, and they are wheelchair accessible. This is the NaSF terminus of line 27. This terminus was not used for ages by any routes. Usually this terminus is just used by routes that have been shortened while they're doing works on lines. For instance, last year this was used by line 8 while they were doing some sort of renovations on line 8 to, I think it was, yeah, line 8 was getting some renovations, don't know which part though. This is the Zakhanov Fabrika or Sugar Factory terminus of line 3. This is the West Park or Zapadin Park terminus of line 10. This is the Obelia 2 terminus of line 6. This again is at the edge of the city. Literally, there is a national road to the back that leads outside of Sofia and into Krasnodar. So yeah, this is again at the edge of the city. A lot of these tram terminals are at the edge of the city. This is the Van Vazov terminus of line 1 and 6. This again is one of the more posh areas that the tram network goes to. I guess Plush Journalist is kind of not too posh either, but also this is the Plush Journalist or Journalist Square terminus of lines 12 and 18. One thing to note is that this terminus has a turning circle, but actually there's no layover point, so tram lines 12 and 18 don't lay over here, but they are short lines, so they have the layovers at Iliancy and at Orlandovsky respectively. So the other terminals, because line 10 also continues to Vidisha up this way. This is the Depot Krasnodar terminus of line 22. Now, one thing to note also here is that, well, well, the line 22 doesn't actually operate out of the depot crossing panel, but it has a turning circle that goes into depot crossing panel, and the standard gauge section goes into there. They do have a bit of standard gauge tracks because at one point in 2017, while they were doing works on line 20, which had blocked off access to depot Iskra, line 22 was running up to Leskatala, where they have a turning circle, which was, again, as I said before, a U-theater. So basically, this was where the Duewags lived the end of the days before they were scrapped. But the Duewags were here for a while in 2017. This is the metro station hand combat terminus of line 7. Why this survives is kind of interesting because only one stop further out from Triangle, which just means triangle, which is literally like a triangle with trams going either way. It's a cool little spot. But basically, that's the case because, I mean, clear, it is kind of busy, but it connects the metro station because further up is just where they used to run to the Dejda, but it's been shortened to here. Now, as I said before, the line 22, the bus station, the terminus is underground, so you didn't have the terminus, but this is the Tatra T6A5s that are now dominant on the line 22. And this is just the Tatra T6B5s. Also, here you have the mineral water fountains, which is hot mineral water. People come here and like mineral water. Fun fact about Sofia. Also, the Sofia Tram Network has some cool stuff to offer. Line 10 between just after Journal Square and just before James Boucher, metro station James Boucher, who's actually an Irish author. So an Irish author has a metro station named after him in Bulgaria, also a street named after him. But basically, line 10 has a forest area, as you can see here. So definitely worth checking out if you have the time, if you're in Bulgaria, in Sofia. This also, one thing to note is that the Sofia Tram Network has recently been getting upgrades and renovations. So this is a recently renovated graphic NaSF. So as you can see here, also Tram line 18 no longer has this allocation, it has much longer Pesa swings. Interesting enough, but yeah, this is basically the new graphic NaSF. As you can see, it looks much better. Some people were saying the quality of the renovation wasn't great, but again, that's, I guess, down to personal judgment. Time will tell. Now, however, whilst, as you can see, the Tram network is getting renovated, there is a reason for that. If you take a look here, you will see that some parts of the Sofia Tram network are very run down, and this is just one example of them. This is along the Ilinci corridor, which there was talks about the metro running here and this being removed, but a bit more about that later on. But as you can see here, this was actually the case with the Ulanisi line as well, which was quite in disrepair. So yeah, some parts of the Sofia Tram network are quite in a quite dire state. And what you'll see here now is you'll actually see, because there's such a dire state, you'll see how they have worn down trams. And this is why generally in Sofia, on average, the average speed of a Sofia tram is 14 kilometers an hour in 2020, which is ridiculously slow. It's probably one of the slowest in, at least in Europe anyway. But yeah, as you can see here, it's quite run down, and this is also what people say is part of what destroyed the Tatra T4DCs, which were only in service for 7 years. Because these Tatra T4DCs ran along line 11, which runs along this area here. And as you can see here, the Schindler Waggons are also being worn down in a sense by this tram tracks, which people have commented. As you can see here, it does wear the trams down, but that is just the way it is. But again, this area probably, who knows, if it gets renovated, it's definitely low on the bucket list, because at least there was plans for it to get extended with a metro, but to be honest, I don't really envisage that happening because there is no need to build a metro here when there's a tram network, and also there isn't really that much inaliency to justify the investment into a metro. So I'm remaining cautiously optimistic that the trams will survive to inaliency, because it's one of the nicest tram lines, I think, personally. Those tram segments. And now a bit about the future of the Sofia Tram network. So basically, the Sofia Tram network is currently going some sort of fleet renewal. Although, unfortunately, as we said, some second-hand Tatra T6A5s were bought in starting 2017 because they didn't have money for new ones. But Pesa swings are being bought, brand new ones, which are to replace the Bulgarian-made trams. Also, if we go back to the tram map here, there are some plans for extension. So, for instance, there is plans, as I said, to extend the line 23 further, and there was also talks about tram going to Studentsky Grad, which just means Student City. However, these are unlikely because the main focus is of the metro, and that's where most resources go to, which leaves very little money for the rest of the tram network. Also, in the future, when the metro is extended, as you've seen, there's a trend for when metro lines get built for tram networks to be removed, apart from metro line M3, which for once then actually duplicate what already existed with tram networks, with the tram network. But basically, there are talks. There was plans that the metro will eventually go to Lindsay, but again, I don't think that's particularly likely. there's a really need for it. But yeah, that's probably why this part hasn't got renovated yet. So folks, that brings us to an end to the commentary part of the Sofia Tram Network. Hopefully this was insightful for you folks, and now there is various footage. I didn't manage to get footage of all tram types, but I did from a lot, and considering I had 6 hours, I think we did quite well, although one is from last year. But yeah folks, now enjoy the footage of the Sofia Tram Network. It definitely has some of the greatest variety out there. So yeah, enjoy.
turistler, ama turist ülkeler, limanlar